Welcome to Shaking Baking with Parkinson's. Hello YouTubers, I'm Jamie, aka Sugar. Glad you've joined us on the channel today. Today is going to be something a little bit different. We're getting into the fall season, getting ready for Thanksgiving. I'm going to make a cake I had never made before last weekend. Found the recipe in the latest issue of Bon Appetit, the Thanksgiving issue. This cake, it's a sweet potato cake. Now, I'm in the South, I've had sweet potato pie before. Never had a sweet potato cake. Never seen a sweet potato cake. You have to try this cake. It is unbelievable. You're gonna be just amazed at the way, how moist this is, and the cream cheese. It's a sweet cream cheese icing that goes over the top of it. Even if you've never made a cake before for the holidays, try this cake, make it. If your family's getting together, please take it over there. They will be shocked when they say, "What kind of cake is this?" Sweet potato cake. What? Delicious cake. But please try this cake. We're going to jump right into it, talk a little bit. But first thing first, this cake takes a little bit of prep time. So I've got the recipe's down below. Right up above the recipe, you're going to see the subscribe button. If you like this channel, you like what I'm doing, please, by all means, hit the subscribe button. Love to have you come back next week, check out what videos I'm going to have, check out the recipe I'm going to make. But right now, it's time for sweet potato cake. So first thing we're going to do, we've got 3 sweet potatoes, about 1.5 pounds of sweet potatoes. We're going to scrub those in the sink, make sure they're clean. Large pot of boiling water, medium-sized pot, whatever it is. As long as potatoes fit in there. Put the water in it, get it boiling. We're going to boil these for 45 minutes. Then we're going to let them cool down so we can get the skin off of them. So step 1, get some water boiling, throw some potatoes in there, and we'll see you when we get done. Okay, so now that we have our sweet potatoes boiled out, they've cooled, peeled the skin off of them, and I've mashed them together so that there's very few lumps in them. Easy thing about that, you don't have to peel the sweet potatoes. So after you boil them, the skins, after they cool off a little bit, don't grab them in because they're really hot. Let them cool off so that you can handle them. Then peel the skins off, let it cool off a little bit, just mash them up real good, just like you would mashed potatoes. Next thing I've done, I've gotten all my ingredients ready to go. I've already measured out, pre-measured out everything based on that. I had time to do that because it takes the sweet potatoes 45 minutes to boil. So while they're doing that, what am I going to do? Go ahead and get everything ready because I need some room temperature butter. I know for the icing, I'm going to need room temperature cream cheese, so I can go ahead and set that out, 2 packs of that. Melt some butter, room temperature eggs. So by this time, everything's already there. It's ready to go. This cake recipe, very straightforward. There's no tricks. There's no shortcuts. It's just everything's going to go in a certain order. We're going to put it all together, mix it, bake it, come out. It's good to go. So there's no real tricky parts to this. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to make sure our oven is preheated, and I also have my 3 9-inch pans. I've sprayed them with Pam cooking spray. I'd like to use the baking spray, and I've also put parchment paper on the bottom of them. You can buy parchment paper rounds to fit those. If you have an 8-inch, that will work just fine. If you don't have a 9, what I do, just set the pan on parchment paper, trace it out best I can, cut a circle. It doesn't have to be perfect, as long as it covers the bottom of it. So I've sprayed the bottom of the pan. Then I put the parchment paper down in there. Got my oven, just went off. It's at 350. So I've got my sand mixer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine all my sugars, which is 2 sugars. There's white sugar and there's brown sugar. I'm going to go ahead and add those into the stand mixer. So I've got that added in there. And I'm just going to let this, for a minute or 2 on low, just kind of combine those sugars together. And once I see the sugars are kind of going to come together, I'm going to add the vanilla in here and go ahead and get that in there. I've got my vanilla measured out. Go ahead and measure it out. You can get these little metal cups at pretty much any big box store or supply store or online. They're really useful for doing this. So I'm going to go ahead and add my vanilla in there and let it start mixing together. And this recipe also calls for vegetable oil. So you'll see down there that it's measured out. I've got my 7 tablespoons of vegetable oil also measured out. I'll put that in there. I'm going to let it mix. I'm going to speed it up just a little bit until that becomes kind of fluffy. So I've got it going on about medium. I'm going to let that go. Now here after a minute or so, I'm going to go ahead and scrape the sides of it, make sure everything comes down together. While I'm doing this, I have the flour measured out. I also have my baking powder. So I'm going to go ahead and add my baking powder in here. I've got nutmeg and cinnamon. I combine them into this. Add that in there. So, and I've also added a little bit of salt. just a dash of salt in with that. So, if you can sift it, if you're easy to use a sifter, a couple different kinds of sifters. If you have one of these, this is great to use. If you don't have a sifter or don't want to sift, just take a whisk and just whisk this around. Cake flour, sometimes it's really good to whisk or sift all these ingredients together. So I can do it either way. Either way will work. For this time, I'm going to go around here just with the whisk. And you'll see that comes together, it mixes together real well. Now, if you're watching this channel, we got Parkinson's. One of the good things we are good at is we can sift like nobody's business. We already have the trimmer going, so you add it in here, put this over another bowl, just sit there and stand still basically. It'll just sift right all the way through, all the way get to the bottom. So a little trick that we have. But sifting is one thing we can do. All right, so this is starting to come together. I'm gonna stop it and I'm just gonna scrape down the sides just to make sure everything's good and combined and everything's nice and wet. That's the main point of here, because we've added the oil, added our vanilla, and with the sugar. This is gonna end up looking like light brown sugar that's a little bit wet, so that's exactly what we want. Scrape some of this off. Okay, so next we're going to add the butter in with all of this. So everything's gotten kind of wet. Now I'm gonna let the butter mix. You can add all three of these ingredients at the same time. You could add the vanilla, the butter, and the oil that they do at the same time. My experience is I like to add them a little bit individually. That's just a personal preference. If you look at the recipe, it says add them all in at one time. Add them all in at one time. It's great. It's gonna turn out just fine. Me, I like to add butter separate than everything else. Once again, just something that a habit that I have picked up that I'm used to doing in different recipes. So either way works fine. It's gonna turn out great no matter what you do with it. Add all the wet at one time or separate. All right, so that is looking really good. I'll turn it up just a little high just for a few seconds. Again, just making sure everything's nice and combined. I've got my dry ingredients that I've sifted over here. Next one I'm gonna do though, I'm gonna deal with the mashed sweet potatoes. Okay, so once that's good and done, just kind of lightly scrape down the sides, make sure everything is nice and mixed together. You wanna have everything nice and combined. That looks very good, very wet, all that liquid, but that's gonna turn out just fine. Okay, next thing we're gonna do, sweet potatoes. We take our 5 eggs at room temperature, go ahead and add them all at one time to the sweet potato mixture. There we go, we got 1, 2, 3. Once again, you could, if you want to, in a separate bowl. If you want to crack all the eggs, add them all to the separate bowl to make sure you don't get any shells in it. That's fine. But you know what? If we do get a few shells in here, I'm going to dig them out. I'm going to take my fork, I'm going to take my spoon, take whatever, take my fingers and get them out. Take part of the other shell, dip it down in there, and you notice, and now you know what? I just got a little piece in there. So what I'm going to do is I take one piece of the shell that's I've already cracked, and I stick that in there, and it tends to stick. Of course, this one won't. Watch this. Well, actually, you know what? It's stuck to the fork. And best I can, got the piece of shell out. There we go. So look at that. So now I'm gonna take my fork. I've got the 5 eggs and I've got the mashed sweet potato. I'm just gonna mix this up until everything is very well combined. It's gonna have a few lumps in it. That's fine because it's gonna end up going in the mixer and that's gonna take care of the rest of it. But I do wanna make sure it's combined before I add it. So that is looking pretty good. And I have just a standard fork I'm doing it. You can do this with a whisk. You can do it with a spoon, as long as it's combined. So there you go. There's the just plain sweet potatoes after I've boiled them 45 minutes till I get no resistance sticking a toothpick in it. Take them out, let them cool, peel the skin off of them, mash them together with a fork, just set them to the side. Because at this point, I've added the eggs, and now we're just gonna pour all this in there. I have a spatula because I want to make sure I get every bit of this in there at one time. Go ahead and add it all at one time. You don't have to do this in stages, just one big mixture. Now I'm going to turn once I finish this, I'm going to turn the mixer on very low and just gradually let this combine. Maybe for a minute or so. Some mixers have a stir setting that's right below there. That's fine. Put it on that for the time being because I don't want to end up with sweet potato all over my face. So I'm gonna turn this now up to low, where it's 2 on my mixer. I'm gonna let that go for about 2 minutes, 1.5 or 2 minutes. And while I'm doing this, I can go ahead and get rid of my eggshells. Now I will say on this cake, and I'll go ahead and tell you now while we're doing this, so be prepared for it. Once it's done baking and the cakes have cooled off, recommendation is to wrap these in plastic and put them in the freezer to freeze these. I know a lot of you that have made cakes before, maybe haven't frozen cakes before. Let me tell you, from the previous times I've made this cake, freeze these cakes because they are very dense. They're not very dense, but they have a lot of moisture in them from this sweet potato. And they're very hard to work with the icing. So that when I iced it, stacked it together, I go to transfer that to the refrigerator, it just slid everywhere. Apron covered in cream cheese icing. We saved it. We brought it back home. We brought it back in, restacked it, chilled it a little bit, put it back together, made it look okay. But if you don't want to deal with that mess, go ahead and take these individual cakes, stick them in the freezer for an hour or two, up to 3 hours or so, then take them out and use them. The cream cheese icing is going to work so much better and stack those together. So this is pretty good and well and combined. So what's the only thing I have left are my dry ingredients. Now, I'm gonna add these in a few different stages. I like to do it 3 times, maybe 4. Sometimes people do it in 2. I think it's nice just for the first one because there's a lot of liquid down in this mixer. I'm just gonna take my bowl and I'm gonna put, about 1/3 or so, a comfortable amount in there. And then I'm gonna start it on slow. And you'll go ahead and see, oh, glad I just started out slow. Just gonna mix it just for a little bit till I see most of that flour is combined. You can pop the side of your bowl. That helps it fall off the side. And I see it starting to combine. I wanna leave it on stir or 2. By overmixing a cake, that's what makes a cake tough. So I wanna just do it a little bit at a time and I wanna do it on stir. And if I put the mixer too high, it really, aerates the batter, gets a lot of air in it, but that will, by overmixing it, we've all had a cake where it looks beautiful, cuts beautiful, you go take a bite out of it and it absolutely is like trying to chew on a brick. It's just really dense, it's really tough, it's really hard. You try and smile while you're chewing it, oh, it's delicious, but you're inside, you're like, this cake is absolutely the hardest thing I've ever done. So, this will keep that from happening. Very slow on the mixer when you're mixing in your dry ingredients. That goes for any cake. The last third that I put in, and this is something else that keeps it from overmixing. I'm gonna put that last third of my dry ingredients in the mixing bowl. But I'm gonna finish it off by hand. So everything's pretty good combined. I'm gonna go ahead and remove the paddle. Scrape any of that cake mixture off. And now I'm gonna go ahead and remove the bowl. And I'm gonna finish adding this last little bit by hand. Just gently stir around and then come through. So just a nice stir, nice and easy until that comes together. This last bit, this is where this will keep you from overmixing the cake. Give you a nice, like I said, you see, I'm making a little mess. It's fine, you're in the kitchen, you're baking. You don't have flour all over you. I mean, people aren't gonna believe that you actually made it. They're gonna think you ran down to the Piggly Wiggly, bought the stuff in the store and stuck it in your own box. We didn't do that because we got flour all over us, right? All right, so that is good and combined. Make sure I really turn over the bottom to make sure I don't see any flour in there. That looks pretty good. So now the next step we're gonna do is I'm gonna evenly divide this. I like to use a scale so I can get close to the same amount in each pan. Because this is going to be a naked cake. It's not gonna be covered in icing. It's just gonna have the cream cheese stacked in between each layer and then on top. So I wanna try to get my layers, as close as I can to the same size. They're not gonna be exact, they never are. So I'm gonna move my mixer out of the way real quick and get my pans. See if I can get my scale. Now I'll do this on grams. It's easier to measure things out in grams when you're pouring things up. You'll notice this recipe is also in grams. I don't have to worry so much about, it's easier to be exact. So let's see, I know from previous times about how much batter goes in here on each one, so hopefully I can get close to that. Okay, so there's one. All right, so I've just about got this ready to go. Let's scrape, make sure I got all that out. Now I'll tell you how much goes in mine. It's about between 650 and 670 grams in each one of these. Maybe a little, you know, depending on the exact weight of the potatoes that you add in here, it might be closer to 700. But that's how much batter is in each one of these. So those are pretty even. Bang them down. Just make sure if there's any air pockets in there, get rid of those. And I'm gonna put them in here, bake them for about 30 minutes, 25, 30 minutes. I'm gonna check them after 25 minutes until a toothpick goes in and comes out completely clean. We'll see when the cakes are done. Okay, so after 28 minutes, taking my cakes out of the oven, toothpick test, sucker it in the middle, comes out completely clean. Means these cakes are absolutely perfect and ready to go. Next steps, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna let these cool for about 5-10 minutes till I can handle them, till the pans cool off a little bit. Then I'm gonna take them out, remove the parchment paper, get them right side up, let them cool all the way. Take maybe another hour, hour and a half. You want no heat coming off of them at all whatsoever. Take each individual cake. I'm gonna wrap it up in saran wrap and plastic wrap, good and tight, and I'm gonna transfer them to the freezer. Let them sit in the freezer for a couple hours. Let them get good and frozen. That way they're easier to deal with. Trust me, from prior experience, you want these cakes to be very, very, very chilled. I'm not a big fan. I don't freeze cakes normally, but with this cream cheese icing, they have a tendency to get a little wobbly. I was transferring, like I said, slid all the way off, fell apart all over me. Put them back together, still delicious. None of them hit the floor. But anyway, get these good and cool, get them chilled. We'll make the icing while these are finishing up, chilling up. Put it together, stack it. We're good to go. Sweet potato cake, it's delicious. Can't wait for you to try this. Okay, so my cakes are chilling in the freezer. They're hanging out in there. I'm gonna hang out in there for an hour or two till they get good and solid. When that happens, I'm gonna go ahead and make my icing, so I'll be ready to go. Now this is a sweet cream cheese frosting. There's a couple options on what you can do. The recipe calls for 8 cups of powdered sugar. That's really, really sweet. If you want a little bit less sweet, you can back it down to 6 cups of powdered sugar. I've also got that in grams, or you can split the difference if you want to. But first thing we do, everything's at room temperature. I've got my butter, I've got my cream cheese, full fat cream cheese, got vanilla extract, got some salt, got my powdered sugar. Now the powdered sugar I have sifted because this icing, it won't be lumpy. It'll be very smooth, a very great icing. So I do recommend go ahead and take your time. You got a couple hours while the cakes are chilling. You know, sift through the powdered sugar. It just makes it a whole lot easier. The icing will be much better. I highly recommend that. First thing I'm gonna do, this is a very simple icing. Go ahead and add the butter, add the cream cheese to my mixer. It is at room temperature. And I'm just gonna mix it till that's blended together. It doesn't take long at all. All right, so as it's mixing, I'm gonna go ahead and turn my mixer up to high just for a little bit, just to get that good and blended together. After this is done, I'm gonna scrape down the sides. It's getting really light. You can tell the big difference in that. Once this icing is done, you just cover it, set it to the side. It'll be fine till you ice the cakes. After I put everything together, I'm gonna stick it back in the fridge just for a little while, let it cool, so it'll slice better. It won't fall apart when you slice it. So this is getting really light. So I'm gonna go ahead and scrape down the sides real quick, just to make sure everything in there is nice and blended. It looks pretty good. Get this side right here. Okay, so now I'm gonna add everything else in here at one time. Now, if you've ever dealt with powdered sugar before, it can create a big cloud. So at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and add my vanilla. Got my tablespoon. Let's go ahead and measure that out. 1.5 tablespoons. So there is my tablespoon of vanilla. And then that's gonna be my half. And also, I'm gonna go ahead and add my salt. It's not much salt, just a little bit of salt. Tablespoon of salt. That helps with the powdered sugar. That will cut some of the sweetness out. All right, so there's my salt. Now this powdered sugar, just gonna be very careful when I'm adding that in there. I'm gonna take my cup measurer. I used to do that, and I'm just gonna, if I don't dump it in there, I'm gonna make a huge mess. I'm gonna make a huge mess anyway. This is gonna happen. If you want to, and I'm thinking about it myself, sometimes when you're doing powdered sugar, cover this bowl, just kind of drape a towel loosely over it. It will keep that cloud when this powdered sugar starts from poof, going everywhere, and then ninja dust, you gotta get out. So, I'm about to get all that in here. I'm gonna do a little bit more. Let's see if I can pour that in. I'll go ahead and in. If it falls out, that's okay. Okay, so, as you see, I'm gonna show you because I'm not gonna cover it with a towel. So I'm just gonna kind of, if you use a food processor, you know, the pulse thing, I'm gonna do that just real slow with my stir. So just real slow. Eventually this is gonna come together and I'll be able to put some speed behind it. But right now, I just want to make sure everything does not go poof, it's up in the air. So now it's starting to come together. And as it starts to, I can hold off just a little bit. I'm gonna turn it up just a little bit, and I'm just gonna let that mix. I'm gonna let that go for a little while, maybe about, a minute or so. And then after I know it's good mixed up, I'm gonna turn it up to, medium high to high and let it mix for 2 or 3 minutes. So right now, it seems a very beigey color. It's like, I don't really want that color on my cake. I want the white, or the really good white cream cheese. As this mixes more and more, you'll be surprised at how light it turns as you mix it. So now, I'm gonna turn this up 2 to 3 minutes. We'll come back, and that'll be our icing. Okay, so the cakes have been in the freezer for a couple hours. They're good and chilled. I've got my icing that we made earlier. I've got that put in 2 piping bags. You don't have to use a piping bag, but I like using a piping bag. I think it's easy. A piping bag, I think it's easier to control. And basically the way I'm gonna ice this cake is put a little bit of icing right here on the cake plate. Then it's gonna be cake, icing, cake, icing, cake, icing. Not gonna cover it. It'll be basically a naked cake or open cake. You may have another term for it, but I'm gonna take the plastic wrap off, maybe. And then we will do the first layer. Okay, so there we go. Now I'm gonna do all these layers and put a little bit of icing down. That just kind of helps it chill. Now after after I finish stacking this up and everything, I'm gonna put this back in the fridge for at least an hour before I serve it, because I want that icing to also set up a little bit. All right, so I'm gonna lay this up. All right, I'm just gonna do I don't wanna overdo the icing because it is slick. And when I ice this, I'm going to leave a little bit of space at the edge of the cake, because when the next cake layer goes on, it will actually, the weight of it will push this icing out to the edge. So if I ice it all the way to the edge, what will happen is I'll have too much icing and it'll start running down the sides of the cake. So that's, I think, about all I'm going to do for that layer. In the recipe, it says about 1/3 of the icing. I use a little bit less than that, honestly. I think 1/3 of the icing is too much icing. It made the space between the cakes a little too high, and it made them very unstable. And as I said earlier, unstable cake makes for an unhappy baker, because you will have cake everywhere. No. Now, because these are chilled, I don't have to get in a hurry. They'll do just fine. For symmetry, I'm going to keep all these cakes right side up. So see there? And then a little bit of weight. I can always come in and fill that in if I want to, but you know what? I don't. I like it just like that. For the sake of symmetry, I'm not going to flip this top layer over and have a flat surface. I'm just going to stack it. Do icing here, I'm stack it the same way, then we'll put icing on the top, and that's going to be all. This is a very simple decorated cake. But if you overdo the icing, you can have a big mess on your hands. I'll do a little bit around the edge, but I'm not going all the way to the edge. And that's it on this cake, folks. I mean, literally, as soon as I put this on here and put icing on the top, I'm done. You can decorate the top of it. You could do, I think the original recipe calls for the orange, the rind from oranges that's kind of curled, put on top or cut. You can do that. You could sprinkle some cinnamon on top. That might be nice. All right, so then put this last layer on there. Make sure it's not leaning. Looks pretty good. See how nice that is? Now I'm gonna be really careful up here because I don't want to overdo the icing. I know I've said that a few times, but I'm only saying it because of my experience with it. I overdid it last time. Got a little zealous with it. I just want to make a very clean looking cake. Now you could pipe different things on here if you wanted to, but I want to keep it very simple. I think that's going to make this cake look really good. Just slowly, just smoothing out. I don't want to put pressure on the top because, like I said, these layers, when you make it, you'll feel the give in between them. And if I put too much pressure on it, this thing's going to start leaning, and that's not what I want. See how nice that is? Now this chills again for an hour. And at the end of that hour, you are good to go. Now if I want to put, again, this just kind of gives it a little texture to the top. There. I think that's all I want to do to it. So this is the completed cake. Like I said, sweet potato cake, delicious. I cannot wait for y'all to try this and tell me how it is. I'd love to hear some comments about it. Again, very straightforward, no real tricks to it other than the chilling of the cakes. Give that kind of a rustic finish there. And once again, this has been Shaking and Baking with Parkinson's. I want to thank the Parkinson's Association of Alabama for all of their help. If you need more information on Parkinson's, please, by all means, send me a note, get in touch with PAA, or get in touch with any of the other links down below. I'm going to put a lot of links down there for information. Davis Finney Foundation, of course the Fox Foundation, do so much work for Parkinson's research. If there's something you'd like to see me bake, I've got some more stuff coming I'm excited to make. Leave me a comment, drop me a line. I'd love to hear some ideas of something you'd like to see. This cake will be amazing for Thanksgiving. It'll be a great fall cake. It's so good. You have to try it to just find out what it is. It's just special. And again, this came from Bon Appetit magazine, the Thanksgiving issue that just came out. It was adapted from Amanda Mack's recipe, a couple changes in it that she has in that book. Great magazine, great recipes in there as well. But, I can't wait to hear how this goes. And again, like we always say, sometimes the road might be a little shaky, but it will always be tasty. See you soon. Thanks.